Let me paint a scene you've probably seen in a meeting. The CEO asks a simple question: why did our sales drop last quarter? The first person answers, so what is basically happening is that in the north region, there's been a distributor issue and also the pricing changed once we introduced it earlier. That may not have affected retail behavior, and on top of that, there have been competitive promotions from two other players, so the situation's a bit complex. Blah, blah, blah. 2 minutes later, everyone in the room is still trying to understand that point. Heads turn to someone else, and that person says one sentence: the main reason sales dropped is distributor disengagement after the margin change. That's it. He captured exactly everything that the first person said, but in one sentence, straightforward sentence, absolute clarity. Suddenly, the whole room understands the issue and the discussion can move forward. And that moment reveals something fascinating about communication at senior levels. Leaders speak in headlines, and most people, the others, the inefficient communicators, speak in paragraphs. Let's know more about this in this episode. So, most professionals explain ideas the way they think about them. It's very natural because naturally we think about it slightly layered, exploratory, a bit messy, which means when you start speaking those ideas, you begin with some kind of a background and then you build a context, and then comes the explanation followed by examples. Maybe eventually you talk about the point. So you're actually beating about the bush and come to the point way later. This is what I call paragraph thinking. It sounds something like, so if we look at what happened over the last few months, or just let me just give you a background, or let me explain the context first. Do you recall saying any of these sentences? By the time the speaker reaches the point, the room is so tired and sleepy, and the listener is thinking, where exactly is this going? ये कहाँ जा रहा है? क्या कहना चाह रहा है? Now watch how senior leaders speak. They reverse the order. They start with a conclusion and then they explain. For example, sales dropped because distributors lost incentive after margin change. Then they may add supporting points depending on if people are listening. Two things cause that: reduced margins and delayed promotion support. Now, what just happened? The listener understands the destination, so everything that follows becomes easier to process. That is why the leaders sound so clear, because not because they're smarter, but because they organize their thoughts differently. Here's a simple habit that can transform the way you speak in meetings. I'm going to share this habit, which is going to make all the difference, turn you into a star. It is a 2 sentence leadership habit. Coming up straight away in the next leg. I know you have great ideas in your head. Before you start explaining that idea, ask yourself 2 questions. What is the headline? And what are the 2 supporting points? Then first speak the headline. Talk about the 2 supporting points if you see the room is listening to you. You may start with something like, the main issue is distributor motivation. Pause. Look at everyone around the room. If you see people are looking at you, they have understood what the main issue is. Now they're waiting to hear why. Then you explain the 2 points. Two things caused it: lower margins and delayed incentives. That structure does something magical. It makes your thinking easy to follow. And easy thinking builds credibility. There's a reason why our brain loves headlines. There's a fascinating reason for this. Because the human brain is constantly asking one question when someone speaks. What is the point? What is he saying? If the speaker answers that question early, the listener's brain relaxes. But if the speaker delays the point, the listener's brain, it keeps searching for an answer. And when the listener's brain has searched for too long, it gets tired, which is why long explanations lose people. Not because the idea is bad, but because the structure is so exhausting. I saw this once play out in a sales meeting. A senior manager was presenting a market analysis. He spoke for almost 5 minutes. There were charts, data, trends, competitors, consumer segments. And finally, the CEO interrupted. He asked the question, "So, what's the takeaway?" And that one question made the whole room silent because it exposed the problem. The presentation had the information, but it did not have the headline. After a pause, the manager said, "The takeaway is that our premium positioning is weakening." And instantly, the entire presentation made sense. The conversation came alive because now everyone understood the issue. Coming up in the next segment is why everyone understood the issue here. They followed the newspaper rule. Let's know more about the newspaper rule in the next segment. People of my generation have read newspapers. I don't know about the Gen Z. I don't think you resort much to newspapers. But think about how newspapers work. You don't just open the newspaper and start reading the paragraphs, right? You read the headlines. Even if you're watching the news, you hear the headlines first and then you decide whether the news is interesting for you. Because the headline tells you the story in one line. The article explains the detail. And great communicators, they do the same thing. They give the headline. Then, when they see they've generated the interest, then they give the explanation. For example, there are 3 reasons the launch failed, or the core problem is consumer confusion, or the opportunity here is pricing. These are clear thinking headlines because they guide the conversation. Senior executives deal with something most professionals don't. They deal with information overload. Every day they hear tons of updates, finance, operations, sales, marketing, strategy. Now, if every update came as a paragraph, their brains would collapse by lunchtime. So, these leaders, they developed a survival habit. They listen for the headline, and when they speak, they deliver that headline. That headline habit creates a powerful advantage. People who speak in headlines, they appear clearer, they appear sharper, and they appear more decisive. Even when their idea is not dramatically different, because that clarity creates confidence in the listener. When someone says the real issue is distributor motivation, people think, this person understands the problem. But when someone says, if we look at distributors and retailers and the incentives and margins, people feel lost. And when listeners feel lost, they lose trust in the explanation. The next time you're in a meeting, listen carefully. You'll notice something interesting. Junior professionals start with speaking like this. So if I give some background, but the leaders will say, here's the issue. The key point is blah, blah, blah. It's not a vocabulary difference. It's a thinking difference. Because leadership communication is not about speaking more. It's about helping people understand faster. And the fastest way to do that is to speak in headlines. If you enjoyed this episode of Communicate 101 Speaking Writing Tips, share it with someone who's ever finished explaining something and asked, "Can you tell me the main point?" Because in the next episode, we'll explore yet another fascinating communication skill. Social conditioning teaches us to wait for our turn, and they say that's an etiquette. Trust me, my turn is not a time, it's a choice. A choice no one teaches you, a choice that can change your trajectory. We'll bust the my turn myth, the my turn trap in the next episode. Thank you for listening to this episode of Communicate 101 Speaking Writing Tips with Sarika Singh. If you want to be notified of upcoming episodes, be sure to hit the subscribe button and follow the podcast. I'll be back to share more stories, more life experiences, and more communication tips every Friday. If you want to reach me or connect with me, just put your comments in the comment box below or mail me at info@sarikasingh.in. I know you're going to rate and review this podcast, so a big thank you in advance. Stay tuned and think about what we talked today.